find the answers to life after death? And what do we do with the answers when we actually find them?
Real Paranormal Television.
With your host, Grayson Schmidt.
I've been an investigator and researcher of the paranormal for over 25 years, and I've been able to investigate some amazing places. But it's not just the places. I've been able to work with some amazing people too. We seek out the answers and get behind the scenes of real paranormal investigations. From orbs to Ouija boards, we will be discussing the hot topics of the paranormal world to try to find out the truth, to explore why we are here, and where do we go when we die. Is this all? Or do we move on to somewhere else? Just what exactly lies beyond this thin veil of life?
Real Paranormal Television.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Irby, and you are watching Real Paranormal Television here at Fort Mifflin on the Delaware.
Thank you for watching another episode of Real Paranormal Television. This week I have something really cool for you guys. I'm going to be taking a trip over to Fort Mifflin and talking with a friend of mine, Lorraine Irby, who is one of the proprietors there at Fort Mifflin. For those of you who know Lorraine, you know she is fantastic. Salt of the earth people, and absolutely a pleasure to be with. For those of you that haven't met her, you're going to start to understand what it really takes, the dedication that's involved behind some of these historical sites, and the sacrifices that people make in order to preserve them, and to volunteer their time in order to raise funds for them, in order to help with events, for just regular maintenance. I mean, things that people go out of their way for to keep these sites alive is really just an honor to be a part of. You have to understand that people are giving their time voluntarily to help maintain these sites, these national landmarks, because they're losing funding from our federal government. Now, this is just a shame because these are places that made America what America is today. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Fort Mifflin. Now, you have to understand, and I'm going to let you guys look into some of the history of this, so I'm just going to be very brief about the descriptions and some of the background of the fort itself. So excuse me if I'm very general about this, but again, research is very crucial to what we do in the paranormal field. Now, it's not just research of a location that we're going to investigate, but it's also research about our history, about what makes paranormal investigating a real phenomenon. It's about what it took to create the location, to create the history, the day-to-day that went on there, the energy that's now absorbed into the walls because of people's emotions and experiences. I mean, we have to understand the sacrifice as Americans that these people made, that these fellow Americans, patriots of our country, made, sacrificed their life, sacrificed themselves personally in the elements, went with nothing, went with very little supplies in order to stave off a tyrannical force. please understand how important it is that we give back our time in some capacity. Now listen, if you can't go and be a volunteer at these sites personally, that's okay. You can represent these sites. You can donate to these sites. You can give your time to these sites. You can raise awareness for these sites. There's all sorts of things that you can do as an individual to help out. You don't necessarily have to be there. But if you can be there, if you can donate your time in person, and you would like to volunteer at Fort Mifflin, I will give you information on how to contact them so that you can give your time, and they need help all the time on a regular basis. But this isn't the only site that needs your help. There's so many sites across our beautiful country that are hurting, that are struggling to keep their doors open, that are a part of the rich history that makes America, America. Now, we have to understand as fellow patriots, as paranormal investigators, as history enthusiasts, because to be a paranormal investigator, if you're not into history, what are you doing here, you know? I mean, yes, science is an aspect of it, spirituality is an aspect of it, connection to people, past and present, is also an aspect of paranormal investigation. But if it wasn't for the rich history, if it wasn't for the sacrifice, if it wasn't for the bloody death that occurred at these locations, we wouldn't have a place to investigate. So you have to understand what went into, creating these paranormal phenomena at these locations. It was the events that took place. It was the bloody history. It was the death. And it wasn't just from, fire from, foreign troops. It was actually accidents. It was starvation. It was disease. There are all kinds of things that led to the death of our fellow patriots and the people that sacrificed so much to help make this country what it was. And I say what it was with a heavy heart, because you know what? I love this country. I'm an American. I was born here. And you know what? Every day I appreciate from the bottom of my heart the sacrifice that our veterans, our troops, and our first responders make every single day, that they selflessly give their time and give their freedom and give their comfort and give up their families and do so much for you and I that we can do just a little bit, as opposed to taking them for granted, to show them how much their sacrifice means. Now please bear with me and please try to understand that, my heart is in this 110%. I do this for so many different reasons. And one of the main reasons is because I want to give back to you, to my fellow paranormal enthusiasts, investigators, and researchers who take this field seriously, who are actually doing something to improve the quality of paranormal investigations on the whole. And I'm not just talking about walking around experience chasing. I'm talking about applying the good science, the good research, and most of all, our time and efforts. We can each do something individually to make our paranormal community the best that it possibly can be. And this is by being a good citizen in the world, by being a good citizen in our paranormal community. It's a really small community. You guys know that as well as I do. Some of you who are new to this, no problem. Listen, you better be tough. I'm going to tell you right now, because you're going to face ridicule, you're going to face critiques, you're going to face turmoil with your families, possibly friends, and there's going to be confrontation, there's going to be ideological differences. But you know what? We need to learn to shelf that stuff. We need to learn to throw our egos out the door and to do the good work that's necessary to make this the best possible experience for everybody, even the people that have just started today. The people that have just started today, I commend you for your bravery, for your ability to forego your fear of death, of encounter, of possible danger with not only spirits, but most of all the environment that you're going to be investigating in. Now, speaking of environment, the day that I was able to get over to Fort Mifflin, it was snowing like crazy, and I had my whole family there. But you know what? We made an incredible day out of it, and it was such a pleasure to be there. And especially on that day, it was freezing, it was snowing like crazy. And you want to know what? It gave me an idea of what some of these people went through to keep our country free, to fight against tyranny, and to raise up as fellow patriots, as fellow Americans, to do what they had to do to make the sacrifices that were necessary for our freedom. our freedom matters. And it's something that I want you in our paranormal community to fight for every day. I want you to raise up, and again, like I've said in the past, raise the bar and make this the best paranormal community that's available. I want you to make this the best possible experience for people that are in this field, give them the respect that they deserve, and let's forget about the drama. That's easy to say and all, but you know what? There's a lot of people out there just causing a lot of problems for no good reason at all. You know, and there's a lot of other people in this that are using this field to take advantage of people. Now, I mean that. This is something really screwed up. This is something that, this is almost as bad as religious persecution or as persecution of ideological, differences. It's crazy to me. Because you know what? We all live in this planet. We're on a little tiny rock floating in outer space. We're all trapped here together until we become spirits. Now, can our spirit then transcend time and space and move throughout the universe and the galaxies? Who knows? We're going to find out that answer one day. But I know for a fact that I've encountered spirits here in the real world that are interacting with people, that are actually trying to reach out and tell their story, that are actually reaching beyond the grave through their spiritual energy to reach somebody who's listening. And you know what? This is another thing I have to say about provoking. Provoking is something that you got to be really careful with what you're doing out there. A lot of people are scared of demons and this and that. And you know what? Are they out there? There's a good possibility. In 25 years of investigating, I've never experienced a demon. I've experienced some very evil entities, but I wouldn't consider them a demon. They had no power over me. They had no power to change my life or the lives of the people around me. They scared the crap out of me, I'll give you that. But you know what? I was able to deal with them. You know why? Because I believe in my connectedness to the universe. Because I believe that I'm a spiritual being walking around in a physical body. And because of that strength, because we're all part of the same light, believe it or not, as beings, living beings, we are light beings. We are actually creating light by being alive. Now, can you wrap your heads around that? I sure hope so, because it all matters. It all is pertinent to what we do in this field. We are a bunch of organic bodies walking around this earth, making a difference or creating problems for people. Which side of the fence are you on? You have to make that decision very clear. And in working together, you're willing to reach out and create a bridge and create a network between people that can be strong. And in our paranormal community, the people that I've encountered and the people that are around me all the time are phenomenal, amazing people. These are people that I consider brothers and sisters, not only in the paranormal field, but I mean in life, in general. These are people that I stay in touch with. I'm on the phone with regularly. I call, if I don't hear from them, I'm harassing them. I want to know what they're doing, what's going on in their lives. This matters. We have to stay a part of our community, but we also have to foster the friendships and the relationships that we can develop every single day. And we need to understand that everybody's in a different place in their life, and we have to account for that in some way. We can't just expect everybody to be a certain way, put it all into a box, package it, and throw it on the shelf. It doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work like that in the spiritual world. We have all kinds of different entities that we're dealing with. We have all kinds of spiritual beings we're dealing with. And we could be dealing with ultra-terrestrials. So in this episode, I want to really stay focused on what our history is all about, how it happened, and the importance of this amazing place called Fort Mifflin. I want you guys to sit back and enjoy. This is the interview with Lorraine Irby at Fort Mifflin. Lorraine, first of all, thank you so much for having me here with you at Fort Mifflin. This is an absolute pleasure. And I just wanted to find out more about your interest in history and the paranormal. So my first question would be, how did you become interested in the paranormal?
Well, actually, I always had experiences all my life. I can remember back as a child experiencing some things. And actually, in my day and age, we would not dare talk about anything like that because people would think that we were crazy. So, as I said, many years I've had experiences. So when I came to work at Fort Mifflin, and so many the paranormal investigation groups came in, and the more that they came in, the more that I felt, well, we could actually start having some programs, and I was just happy to accommodate the investigators and gave me an opportunity to actually learn a lot on my own.
Now, Lorraine, you said that you had experiences as a child. Could you tell me a little bit about one of the experiences?
Well, I can't totally remember everything, but it was interesting because when I worked here and we started the paranormal events, my whole family, I'm the oldest of 6 children, and we grew up in a haunted house.
Oh, how cool.
So all of us had experiences, but as I said, that we didn't talk about it. So when I first started getting involved with the paranormal here at Fort Mifflin, and we were at a family get-together, and we started talking about it a little bit, and everybody chimed up as what experiences they had in the house that we lived in.
Oh, neat. So it was sort of like a recap.
Right. Including my father, who at the time of this get-together was 79 years old, and never thought in a million years that he would believe in anything like this. So he also started talking about a couple experiences that he had. And then he talked about me when I was about 3 years old, that I had an imaginary friend. And I actually, when he started talking about that, I didn't quite remember having an imaginary friend, but I remember sitting at a table and chair set, and I remember my father coming out and saying to me, Lorraine, who are you talking to? Like, which he admitted it used to drive him crazy. And I have the memory of thinking, I got scared when my father asked me that, and if I told him who I was talking to, he wouldn't believe me.
Wow.
And he would think that I was lying to him. So that was the part of the experience that I remembered later. So as I thought about it, is I must have been maybe talking to a ghost, blocked out that area of what happened, but I remember the results of it.
How incredible.
So
growing up in a haunted house is an incredible and unique experience, and it's amazing that you were able to come together later as a family to discuss it openly and actually share some of your memories about that. Now, what part of the country was this?
it was in Philadelphia.
Oh, local.
It was northeast Philadelphia. That's where our home was. So
Do you know anything about the history of the house?
I don't.
Okay.
I really don't. But it was there was actually there was a story that there was a fire in the house next door, and our house actually was the only one on next to an open lot.
Oh, wow.
So the house next door burned down, and there was someone who died in the house from the fire. So because we were the only ones there, my mother did mention at one point that he could have probably have come over to our house since his house was gone.
Wow, that's an incredible story. This is an incredible location. I mean, this is revered as one of the hottest paranormal spots in the country. How, have you experienced anything out of the ordinary here?
Well, since I've been involved with the paranormal and all the paranormal programs that we have here at Fort Mifflin, I have experienced many things. I have not had a conversation. It wasn't like I see ghosts like they were, here all the time. But every part of Fort Mifflin at one time or another, I have had an experience, including this office.
No kidding.
Now, I have been touched. I had a hand go through my hair, pokes on my arm, someone tugging at my jeans. I've seen shadow people, and I saw actually the blacksmith as a full-figured apparition.
Oh my goodness.
And I've heard noises that weren't explained. So I've had many experiences.
Do you attribute that to the incredible history of the fort?
Actually, Fort Mifflin served 6 wars. This was the biggest, bloodiest battle in the Revolutionary War. There was a large garrison of men here during the War of 1812. During the Civil War, this was used as a military prison. It wasn't north or south. It was, if you were a criminal, you were in prison here. There was south, the Confederates in casement number 1. Now, we had political prisoners at the time, and this is during the Civil War, that actually died here from dysentery. And they, not only some of them died here, but they also died shortly after their release.
No kidding.
During World War I, it was a huge ammunition depot, and they had enough ammunition here that the newspapers reported that it could blow up the world.
Wow.
So when the newspapers reported that, they decided to distribute the powder across the country.
No kidding.
So during World War II, there was a small battalion of men stationed here for a very short time, but their mission was to be river defense for the naval base. And during the Korean War, it was used as a supply depot. So throughout these many years, there have been, there was a big battle. According to Plum Martin, and there is no exact record of how many soldiers were killed here, but he estimated that there was about 300 men, 300 soldiers, and that the fatalities were not a small number. So there was many people that were soldiers that were killed here during the Revolutionary War. And then you always had deaths from accidents, normal accidents. You have death through fever, through disease. And during the War of 1812, that's when families started coming in. So you had women and children who also died here of yellow fever, which are in our records.
I'm going to say, now we're in an outbuilding that's outside of the fort. Was this an officer's quarters at some point in time?
No, this was a hospital building.
Oh, interesting.
Originally, it was about 1814 that they built this hospital building. And in the beginning, it was all hospital, and then later on, and I don't know how many years, it was just a hospital. But later on, the second floor was a hospital, and downstairs was the mess hall.
Interesting. Now, so the office is set up here, and you said that you've experienced things right here in this building. So do you attribute that to this being a hospital, and perhaps people have passed in this building?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. And actually in the 80s, early 90s, I don't know the exact date, but we had a caretaker who lived here, and he died here. He died in this building.
No kidding. So do you think perhaps it's his spirit, or do you believe that it could be a spirit from an even older generation?
Both. I think that there's both.
Is there anything specifically that would make you think that would attribute to it being both, or different voices, or different patterns of voice, or accents perhaps, or?
No, I haven't really heard anything, but I actually had a full figure shadow that was this one day I was leaving to go home, and Wayne was coming to pick me up. Wayne is my husband, and we go home together. So I looked out the window as I was going to open up the door for him, because I believed it was Wayne that I saw through the window. When I opened up the door, there was absolutely nobody there.
Oh my goodness.
And I know positively, absolutely, I saw a full-figured person at that window.
That's incredible.
So now I think that was more modern. That was because the way that he was dressed.
Interesting.
But I even thought that when I opened the door, he hurried behind the door. I thought that when I opened the door, Wayne hid behind the door to jump out and go boo at me. And I looked behind the door, and there was nobody on that porch.
Now, Lorraine, can you tell me about your history here with Fort Mifflin and how long you've been here working, and in what capacity you work here?
Okay, I started working here in 1996, and I started out as a volunteer, working down at the guard shack at the front gate to sell tickets. And slowly but surely, I was getting some office work to do as I was waiting for people to come in. So it was doing a little bit of office work and selling tickets every weekend. So eventually I got built up to working a few days in the office here to when the other office staff left, I was hired as the office manager.
Oh, how cool.
So, but I also became, at the time, I was the only one in the office for quite a few years. So I was like kind of everything. Office manager, program director, event coordinator, so you name it, I did it. Now, Fort Mifflin is a National Historic Landmark. It's a 501c3 non-for-profit organization. And that is a good thing, and that's a bad thing. The good thing is that no one can tear it down. The bad thing is we get no funding. So we generate our funds by the public gate receipts, the many events that we do, the paranormal, Boy Scouts. We have Boy Scouts coming in. So we're kind of generating our own funding, which is not easy all the time.
Right. Right. Now you also have reenactments.
Yes, we do.
Which is fantastic. I mean, this is reliving history in an incredible location. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about the reenactments, because I know that's a very popular event.
Right. Well, our big reenactment is the Siege of Fort Mifflin. So that's always the second week of November, and that men, women, and children, we have about 300 reenactors here for that. It's men, women, and children dressed in period dress, and they have 2 battles per day, 2 battles on Saturday, 2 battles on Sunday, and and a lot of living history set up. So when people come in, they can kind of get the idea of maybe something. There was no women or children here during the siege at all, but it kind of also gives a little bit of history of the women and the children and the camp followers that were at the time. Although they were not here at Fort, and that I just want to clear that up. So, but it gives a lot of living history, and people can understand what life was like at that particular time.
Touching on that, Lorraine, about how life was like here at the fort during especially the Revolutionary War, what were the conditions for these soldiers? What were the living conditions and the accommodations?
That's a very good question, Grayson, because Washington was never here at the fort. And I think that's probably why the site is not as popular, as other sites may be where he was, but he paid a lot of attention to the fort. And he wrote a lot of letters to Congress because Fort Mifflin was extremely important to him. So basically this was the Alamo of the Revolutionary War. So they kept the British out of the city long enough for Washington and his men to get to Valley Forge. Now, if you read some of the letters that he wrote to Congress, it's extremely sad because it was winter, there was snow on the ground, it was completely mud, it was called Mud Island. It was called Fort Mud on Mud Island, and the conditions are basically the same today as they were then. There was snow on the ground. They had no proper shoes to wear. They had no proper clothing to wear for winter, and they weren't as sophisticated as what the British were. They didn't have the weaponry that anywhere near what the British had. Although they did have a lucky shot to sink one of the biggest battleships that the British had right here at the river base here.
Start up again with about that they sunk the British ship because the plane went by.
Oh, okay. So they did get lucky enough to sink a British battleship, and it was one of the biggest ones that the British had right here on the base of the Delaware.
Oh, how cool!
Now they had grape shots. The officer told all the soldiers that for those who could catch a grape shot, that they would get a swig of rum. So all the soldiers were out there trying to get the grape shots. Well, that isn't such a handy thing to be doing, but that's how, so they could shoot them back at the British.
Interesting, but it kept the spirits up.
Maybe it kept them warm, I hope.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I mean, it's such a
the conditions were really bad.
it's such a tragic history. I mean, what it took to keep this country free from tyranny. And what do you believe the state of the country is now? I mean, what do you feel is going on?
Do I really have to answer that?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I was just, it's just funny
I
how
think that we need another revolution.
I mean, we fought so hard to free ourselves from tyranny, and it looks like we're going back down that path again.
I know. It's the truth.
Unbelievable.
It's just that we have so many, it seems like we're becoming under a dictatorship, that we're told what to eat, how to eat, what we should buy, what we shouldn't buy, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and it's a very sad situation.
Doesn't sound like freedom, does it?
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
Lorraine, how can people volunteer here at the fort?
Well, you can call any time and let us know what hours that you might be available and any kind of skill that you might have. It's very difficult, I know, in this day and age, because a lot of people are occupied with their own jobs. But anytime that you be able to volunteer, just give us a time, and we can try to figure something out to give you as a duty. We need a lot of people to do a lot of work many times throughout the years. So especially when we have our events, it is always helpful to have people come in and help us park the public, help with food, help with getting things together. That's always a very big plus when we have some people who'd be willing to volunteer for that time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Grayson, and it was a very big pleasure.
As you can see from this video, Fort Mifflin is an incredible place to investigate. Not only is it an incredible place to investigate, but the people that work there are amazing too. These guys are devoted 110% to maintaining the fort's integrity and history from ever diminishing. Now, we as a paranormal community can do a lot to help out the fort. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a beef and beer coming up locally. If anybody wants to participate, I'm going to put up some information about that. That's going to benefit not only Fort Mifflin, but another really incredible cause. I'll post that for you, so if you guys are interested in joining and or donating, you're more than welcome. The fort itself needs volunteers. It needs people like you. It needs people that are into history and can offer something, any kind of trade help or any kind of labor that you can help with, even volunteering for ticket distribution or simply parking. The events that are held at the fort range from paranormal events to reenactments to just daily tours. So if there's anything that you can do to help not only Fort Mifflin, but other incredible historical sites that might be close to you, your efforts would be greatly appreciated. Please spread the word. Please spread the spirit of volunteerism, as well as the spirit of paranormal investigating and researching. This next clip is from a good friend of mine, Darren Evans. He's from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a paranormal researcher who's devoted a ton of time to investigating and finding out and culminating information on a phenomenon called the Zozo entity. This is a Ouija board phenomenon. Those of you who are familiar with using a Ouija board can understand that some interesting things can happen from that. Those of you who are not familiar with using a Ouija board, it's been around for a long time, and it's a means of divining and or communicating with spirits, much like the modern ghost boxes or ITC equipment does these days. A Ouija board can be used in much the same way. Now, you have to be careful when you're dealing with spirits from the other side, because you don't know what you're dealing with. They don't necessarily reveal themselves to you as what their true intentions would be, just like people. So be really careful if you're using a Ouija board, and it's best to use them with somebody that's experienced. Now, this Zozo phenomenon dates actually all the way back to ancient Sumeria. In ancient Sumeria, the mythology plays out that this being, this Anunnaki, Zozo, attempted to usurp the Enlilship by taking the tablets of knowledge from Enlil. Enlil caught up with Zozo and crushed him, basically crushing his skull and killing him here on Earth. The spirit of this entity probably roams the earth right now. Now, what's pretty incredible is this is not human. This was never human. Much is understood about demonic entities, but I don't think demons are as around every corner as people might lead you to believe. Demons are a very rare phenomenon, if at all. And if you're fortunate and or unfortunate to run into one or encounter one in your travels or investigations, please be careful, because you don't know what you're dealing with. It could be a very powerful entity, and it could use the guise of another entity to ruse you into believing that it's something that it's not. So please enjoy this clip from my friend Darren Evans, and understand that I'm going to be interviewing Darren in depth at another time. But for right now, this was a clip that he sent me, and it'll get you caught up a little bit with what this Zozo phenomenon actually is.
My name is Darren Evans. I'm a paranormal researcher from Tulsa, Oklahoma. You're watching Real Paranormal TV, and I'd like to thank Grayson Schmidt for inviting me to talk about my research into what I coined the Zozo phenomenon. What got me into the paranormal field was a pretty strange set of circumstances that involved the finding of a double-sided Ouija board outside Tulsa, Oklahoma that's found underneath a house. On one side was a standard William Fold talking board that we traced to the 1930s. However, it was the other side of the board that was very just flat out scary looking. Had candle wax drippings all over the board, burn marks, various symbols. The strangest part, however, was that somebody inscribed the word Zozo into the board itself. The board was also, it was found circled by preserved blackbirds that were in old antique lightning jars that were very well preserved. So immediately I began sessions with this board. Me and my ex-girlfriend conducted sessions, and some very strange phenomena took place. This particular spirit would identify itself immediately. Definitely some very evil, negative type of spirit. It basically said it was going to follow me around for the rest of my life. It had the ability to read minds. And again, some various locations that I took this board. I mean, I kind of turned into the guy that if you didn't believe in the spirit world, people would bring me over, and I made believers out of people. So basically, fast forward to the 90s when the internet came out, I began kind of checking around, snooping around to see if anybody else had run across this particular entity, and sure enough, they had. Some stories began to unfold in the 90s. The first of which was called, the author called it Zozo the Reptoid, in which he described his experiences on the Ouija board, in which Zozo actually showed itself. So basically in 2009 I started a blog documenting the stories and showing some of my research into this phenomenon. And I had no idea that it would culminate in receiving hundreds of emails from across the world with people claiming to have had experiences with this same particular entity. And I began some serious research in 2009. If you Google the term Zozo, you'll run across my website that's had over 1 million hits. My site trackers have indicated hits from the Vatican. Someone from the Vatican is parked on my site for long periods of time. Various government agencies, universities from all over the world. The phenomena shows an interest worldwide, and the experiences that people send me are from all over the world. Japan, Europe, the UK, Australia. And people, once they have it, they get on a Ouija board, this thing comes and identifies itself, and that's when it starts. Now, not every experience with Zozo produces paranormal phenomena. However, there are a lot of stories sent to me that are very similar in my experiences, where things begin to happen, and people, ask me if I think the Ouija board is dangerous. Not so much the Ouija board itself, because the Ouija board is a tool. But folks, how many stories have you heard where positive things have happened from the use of Ouija boards? I don't think it's a good thing to have on paranormal investigations. I think it can distract people from investigating. And I've become kind of the guy that warns people what can and does happen when you put your hands on this planchette and begin speaking to the spirit world. Now, the scientific world believes that they explain the movements and the conversations that take place as the ideomotor effect. However, that's not an explanation for my experiences that I've conducted. It's been my experience that one would expect the auto movements to conflict with one another and not produce focused and meaningful messages. There has to be some type of unifying force at work where these movements are instantaneously resolved into a group effect. But there's no scientific literature to base this off of. I mean, how are we to explain how the ideomotor effect operates independently on 2 or 3, 4 people, yet only produces, one coherent sentence? We would have to assume that the exact same sentence was in the mind of all the individuals. It doesn't make sense to me how by placing your hands on a plank you can just suddenly unlock your subconscious mind. So, there is some fascinating research going on with what's going on from a scientific perspective of what happens when we play with the Ouija board. And so we're definitely keeping an eye on that. However, I do believe that through our minds we are able to speak and communicate with the spirit world. Having done a lot of paranormal radio shows, I've had the opportunity to discuss the phenomena with some very experienced and knowledgeable people such as Robert Murch, the Ouija historian, Rosemary Langiley, John Zappis. I've been very fortunate to discuss my experiences with various people in an attempt to try to explain what the hell's going on here with so many people reporting experiences with this particular entity. And so, the whole Ouija phenomena, it remains very controversial and something that we definitely want to keep an eye on. I've had a lot of criticism pointed my direction as to, well, Darren, you're feeding it energy, I do feel somewhat to blame that I've kind of created a monster, so to speak, but folks, people need to know that this thing's out there. I take my research very seriously. I do not like the way that Ouija boards are marketed to a young demographic, to teenagers. You've got your pink Ouija boards, your pastel Ouija boards. Indeed, a lot of teenagers and young people become very scared when they run across this thing because it does have negative agenda. It will tell you things. It will pretend to be a deceased loved one, and has the ability to answer questions that people didn't have the answers to, right? Someone's middle name or someone's date of birth. And one very important aspect of this phenomenon is that I warn people not to ask questions pertaining to future events. I've had two close friends of mine that have died as a result, or not as a result, but the Ouija board predicted their death. In one particular instance, my best friend, me and him were on a board, and he had asked him how he was going to die, and it said at night, all alone, in a car wreck. And indeed, this took place, and my friend died. And so I do believe that you have to be very careful. I don't know if it's the laws of attraction, laws of recognition. I don't know. I cannot explain how Zozo comes to certain people, and people contact me asking me how to conjure Zozo, and I would never even try to tell people how to get in touch with this thing. It does appear to be attracted to people that are depressed or maybe under some type of have some type of medical diagnosis going on where they're not so sure of themselves, and people that it remains a very controversial. Just trying to get your hands on this phenomenon. This thing would say that it's has the ability to attach itself to people, and in many instances, many cases that I've consulted with, something other people's sessions that's kind of started even as far back as the 1970s, that this thing would stick with people for life, and years later these people contacted me and described things very similar to my experiences, where some very bad things happened after Zozo surfaces.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Real Paranormal Television. I really appreciate your support for not only the Facebook page, but the website. Please stop by and give me some feedback. Let me know what you think of the show, and let me know if there's any areas of interest that you might have that you'd like to see covered on the show. I would definitely like to touch base with a lot of you, find out what your interests are, and also I have a lot of really cool interviews coming up. So please stay tuned. Join me again for another episode of Real Paranormal Television. And until then, thank you so much, and keep it real.
Real paranormal television.
Copy that.